If you're looking for the cheat codes to being unstoppable in the snow, I'm going to give you everything you need to consider, from what to build, what tires work best, and even all the times you probably shouldn't use lockers. To be completely honest with you, I just ordered tickets to go to Iceland to make a snow wheeling video. I'm very fired up right now, and I've compiled a list of between 19 and 23 tips and tricks, depending on how many make it in the video. And I'm finally doing this video that many of you have been asking for years. The first thing that we have to talk about in this video is lockers. Lockers can actually be unsafe and detrimental if you're using them at the wrong time in the snow. Specifically where I live, where there's all this like ledgy stuff that's off camber. In the snow, this is extremely dangerous, and people roll down mountains all the time because of stuff like this. So this little clip is a great example, because when I've got the rear locker on, you can see the rear end sliding over and trying to go down the mountain. But whenever I turn the rear locker off, it starts to straighten back out. The problem is not all snow is the same. This is in like central eastern Washington, where I've found that lockers usually work a lot better in their snow over there. And in this instance, I'm plowing uphill off camber. I need the rear locker to work, but I also need to not roll down the mountain. So I'm modulating it and trying to use it when I absolutely have to, and then turn it off when I absolutely don't have to have it. This clip is one of my favorites of like all snow wheeling I've done, but if you look closely, you will see the rear tires are spinning at different rates because I'm using 0 lockers to go up this snowy hill. This is a really dangerous hill. We are back in Western Washington for this clip, and the snow is typically much wetter and much heavier over here, which I find you don't really need lockers for. I will go like many weekends in a row without touching the lockers on any of the vehicles that I use in the snow, because it just seems to still be able to grab as long as you can get those big pillowy tires to just be aired down super flat and modulate your throttle, and just be, you know, anytime you start to feel it sink and stop, that's when you back up and try again. In my experience, lockers really do need to be used sparingly in the snow. And there's a whole bunch of other circumstances around that, but typically, I mean, the Samurai is honestly such a great example of a vehicle that I just leave open 99% of the time, and then I use the lockers as like my reverse Uno card to slap that card down and be like, okay, we buried these 43s, can I get out of Stucksville? And so I hit the locker buttons, I put it in R, and then I hope that it goes R. The last part of this whole like locker diatribe that I'm on really needs to coincide with this next test I'm gonna do, which is where I'm gonna talk about all-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive in the snow. Vehicles that say they are triple locked, they have a hidden power that a lot of people in America are not aware of. So this is all-wheel drive. Right now, we're in all-wheel drive. I can turn full lock, and it's hardly grabbing in the gravel at all, because we have a center differential. So we have a differential in the front axle that allows the 2 tires to spin at different rates, differential in the rear axle that allows those to spin at different rates, but we also have another differential in our transfer case. And what I love about, I've owned a Land Cruiser and this Land Rover, and what I love about the Land Rover versus the Land Cruiser is that the Land Rover allows me to go in all-wheel drive low, which is really cool. When you're doing like Forest Service roads and stuff, you want a little bit more torque going up like really steep grades, but you still want to be able to like turn tight on switchbacks. Very nice. So now we're gonna put it in four-wheel drive. Put it neutral. There we go. And so this is center diff lock, and this is four-wheel drive. So now we've locked up the center differential, and it's just starting to bind. Oh yeah, it's doing this kind of wobble thing, which is gonna be hard to detect on camera. But it's like you can feel as the front tires are just kind of doing their own thing, because the front and rear axles are now locked together. So there's still slip between the tires, but there's enough of like a load in between all 4 tires that you feel it when you're turning in the gravel. It's actually not as dramatic in this as it is in the other vehicles that I own, but I can sense it. I hope that comes across on camera. We'll see. Now, let's do four-wheel low. We're gonna do front and rear lockers, and this is where we go back to the tail end of the locker conversation. If you're in snow, you've got your front and rear lockers on. and you start to turn, the bind, oh, it's like hitting the brakes, and it's trying to yank the wheel hard right now. So if we're in snow, we have all 4 tires trying to turn at the exact same rate. What's gonna happen is when you're turning those front tires, it wants to dig because there's this imbalance between all 4 tires. And whenever I'm just driving on the gravel, it's not a big deal because I can't sink. But when you're in the snow, it doesn't even want to let me turn. I really need to add hydro assist to this Land Rover bad. But whenever you're in snow, that difference between the tires is going to make the truck want to dig down the second you start to turn, which is where all-wheel drive is really nice. I have had a lot of trips in this where I am just decimating snow in all-wheel drive using the factory traction control, which is a whole nother topic. Traction control is very valuable if you have it. And I took this trip to Canada one time specifically where like I'm driving around all the stuck people. I am ripping everybody out. This thing weighs probably 2,000 or 3,000 pounds more than everybody who's stuck. There's no reason this should have been outperforming everyone. But we had low tire pressure. We had all-wheel drive. So anytime other people were turning with lockers on and stuff, they would just instantly get stuck. And I didn't have that problem because I was taking advantage of all-wheel drive, and I wouldn't even think about touching my lockers out there because it was the type of snow that wasn't very deep. It was just really hard to get traction, and by using the tools that I had available to me, we're able to get out of there, pull a bunch of people out, and have a really fun weekend. I don't want to make this video an hour long, so I need to speed up these explanations a little bit. Now we're going to move to axles, from the least desirable axle type for snow to the most desirable. And as someone who has 1-ton swapped a few things, the 1-ton axle to me is the least desirable for snow. Just because you are dealing with much larger center sections, you will dig way more than you will with a set of half-tons. And to me, a set of half-tons isn't necessarily off of a half-ton truck, but like modern Jeep Gladiator axles. You're getting a lot of strength out of those still because the new tech in these axles is incredible, but you are gaining quite a bit of clearance over a set of 1-tons. From there, I think like the 80 series Land Cruiser axles, like what I've got in my Land Rover, my small Land Rover Yeti, people are sleeping on the capability of a vehicle that has the front and rear axle passenger side offset or driver side. Meaning that the front and rear axle, once the front axle clears a path in the snow, the rear axle follows, and I have noticed a big difference in snow wheeling vehicles that have a front and rear offset that is matching. So to me, that would be the next most desirable axle type. From there, I think that having an IFS with a solid rear axle is going to be the next because, yeah, the front isn't clearing, but the front is able to float up on top of the snow a lot better. So even though you're dragging the rear axle, you're only dragging one axle, which I personally, with my Tacoma, have found it's a game changer. It makes a huge difference. In fact, I've done side-by-side comparisons with others' friends' trucks on the exact same tire and the exact same size tire. And with me being IFS and them having a solid front axle, there's a noticeable difference in snow performance. And then without going to portals, I think that the next most capable is going to be something that's IFS IRS, independent front suspension, independent rear suspension. I haven't played around with this much, but I will be soon because I bought a full Hummer chassis that we're going to put underneath the Jeep, and we're going to try to make like a 4-corner independent suspension Jeep that's going to be on portals, and I think that that's going to be like the perfect situation to try to test an IFS IRS snow rig. Tire chains and snow. This is going to be a little controversial, and I'm not going to pretend to know everything here. I have been talking about doing a apples to apples snow chain comparison test. But chains for 40s and 37s are very, very expensive. And I know that's what most of you would want to see. Finding someone with like 35s and chains and having them go out with us with like 40s and 37s and stuff, I don't think people would look at that as being a fair test. But here's what I can tell you. In the last 20 years of wheeling, I've seen chains used a little over a dozen times. And in every single instance that I have seen, the person with chains ends up pulling them off and just airing down super low. There's a couple problems with chains. One, you can't air down to like 2 or 3 PSI. That's crazy low pressures because the chains want to come off and eat your truck. So that means that you're not going to have the level of flotation as the people around you who are aired down super low because they have this fat contact patch and yours is super narrow. However, I think that there is a type of snow, If you're like in spring snow, something where it's like the snow is a few months old, it's super dense, you're not prone to sinking, you're just having a hard time getting traction, I think in those instances, chains would be very beneficial. But I think that it's rare. And there's actually, here, let's take a look. There's another big problem with chains. If you put a chain on this tire, it is going to increase the diameter of the tire, and when a piece of rubber hits, like this isn't done yet clearly, but when a piece of rubber hits steel or aluminum, you know, it can grab pretty good, but it's nothing like a chain. A chain will try to eat this bed if this tire comes up and touches this bed at all. So there's a really big issue with even testing chains, and the fact that most people don't have vehicles that have so much clearance that you can slightly increase the diameter of the tire with steel and have it not just try to eat the truck.
Air pressure, wheel type, and tire type. The wider your wheel is, it's going to match a wider tire better. I've seen some tire tests out there. I'm not going to call anybody out. I'm not interested in that at all, where they're comparing wide tires to skinny tires, and they're not using a wide enough rim to stretch out the wider tire to its full size. This is very, very important. So if you want a nice wide footprint, which is extremely important, you want a footprint that's long and a footprint that's really wide. Whenever you want to float over deep snow, you want to make sure you have a wide enough wheel. You want to make sure that the wheel is either a bead grip or a bead lock, something that is going to lock into that bead so you can get deep into single-digit tire pressures. And you don't want to go so low that the inside of your tire touches the inside of your tire, because that's how you're going to get tire damage. Anything above that, you don't have to worry about the tire, in my opinion. I've ran a couple dozen different brands of tire at this point, and I've only seen one, the Milestar Patagonia, fail in the snow ever. That's the only tire I've ever seen fail in the snow. So the goal is big contact patch on the snow, and the lighter the vehicle, the better that's going to work. So if you're sinking and all your buds aren't, and you need to be able to float, you either need a lighter vehicle or you need a larger contact patch. Like, it's pretty simple, really. You just want to have like the least amount of pounds per square inch on the snow to keep you from sinking. Now, I've already done an entire video on the mud terrain versus all terrain debate when it comes to snow. I have spent a ton of time in both in the snow, and I personally favor all terrains. And the cliff notes of that video are basically, I prefer an all terrain because whenever you do spin, which is going to happen, you're less likely to dig. Oftentimes, you'll just lose traction with an all-terrain, which I prefer. Whereas with a mud terrain, if you could have the exact same size tire, the same carcass, everything, but just a different tread pattern, something more aggressive, whenever you get to a point where you're spinning, you're digging instead of just spinning. That said, there are so many different types of snow, and there are so many different situations, and I mean, I've got some extremely aggressive mud terrains on my Samurai, and it destroys in the snow because it's light enough and the tires are big enough that those aggressive tires basically turn into tank tracks. They're unbelievable. However, again, on the other flip side, and the reason I'm such a fan of all-terrains, if you look at the company that makes the largest snow-specific tires in the world, Arctic Trucks, they make a 44, I can't remember how wide it is, it's ridiculous, but a 44-inch snow tire, it's an all-terrain. They also make a 38-inch snow tire that is also an all-terrain. They don't make mud terrains for the snow because all-terrains do perform better in the snow, especially when you combine it with a soft compound that stays soft at low temperatures, a ton of siping, which is what they call microcuts over in Iceland. And I have a set of these 38-inch Arctic Trucks tires, and they are phenomenal in the snow. If you think whatever tire you've got, it might be really good in the snow, but I promise if you go to a snow-specific off-road tire in these larger sizes, it is night and day over the other stuff, the other offerings that we have here in the States.
The 3 peak and the mud and snow ratings that you find on the side of tires are not like the end-all be-all, but they are an indicator that at least these tires have been tested to a DOT spec. So in order to get these ratings, a tire company will basically submit their tire to be tested, and then it will be tested from a bunch of engineers in order to make sure that it meets a minimum specification. I have looked into these minimum specifications. They're not that overwhelming. So I would say that
The indicator that it's the end-all be-all snow tire would not be given to you by the fact that it has the 3-peak rating, but if it meets the 3-peak rating, the mud and snow aside, if it meets the 3-peak rating and it's a tire that you're interested in, I would say at least this is an indication that when you get down into those really cold temperatures, that it's going to still be pliable and soft. Because that's something that I've noticed through testing a ton of different tires in the snow, is that a lot of mud terrains, they're built with a compound that is not that soft in the snow. It continues to get harder as the temperature goes down. Whereas the tires that I have tested that are 3-peak rated seem to stay pliable no matter what the temperature is.
I could see a world where there's a lot of promise in tire studs. My buddy John with the Fiat, he has tire studs in his tires, and he thinks that they make a difference. And I could see in the right conditions them definitely making a difference. So I plan on experimenting more with tire studs in the future and seeing if they work on my rigs and my tires. Grooving is another strategy, and I have a whole video on how I grooved a set of KM3s, and I noticed a giant difference in snow performance with the KM3s whenever I grooved them. So that's something else. Maybe watch that video, see if that's something that you want to do. But I have found that grooving, and I actually have a really big set of tires on their way for my Samurai, and I plan on grooving the crap out of those because I definitely am a groover believer. So if you're looking for something that's labor intensive but is very inexpensive once you have your hands on a groover, grooving I think makes a huge difference in the snow. As far as snow recovery gear, it's basically all the same recovery gear you would take anywhere else except for a kinetic energy rope. Like most rock crawlers, I wouldn't see needing a kinetic energy rope, but in the snow, this is my go-to tool. They are fantastic, they're fast, and if you use quality gear, they're extremely safe. However, they're not perfect for all recoveries. If you've got a buddy who's like on the side of a hill or edge of a cliff or something like that, I would not go to the kinetic energy rope for that, because sometimes people don't necessarily recover completely straight out of where they are. So when I'm in a big open field or a normal trail or something like that, kinetic energy rope, 10 times out of 10. But if you need to do a slow recovery to make sure someone doesn't slide on you, you got to use something a little bit slower, and I think that the winch is the obvious go-to for those kinds of situations. I'm going to Iceland in order to not just experience their culture and the way that they snow wheel, but I want to learn, like, what do they do differently than what we do? And I would like to go to Antarctica, which sounds crazy, but I want to make a snow wheeling video in Antarctica. I want to make a snow wheeling video like in Finland or Norway or just different places around the world. I love snow wheeling and I love travel. And so if you live in any of these places, if you live in Greenland, will you please get a hold of me? Anybody who lives in any of these places, I would love to come and experience your culture. So let me know in the comments. Also, if you have other pointers for people who are beginners that you think I should have covered and I didn't, please let me know in the comments. And if they're really good, I'll pin them. It sucks you can't pin more than one comment, but in any case, this is just a video to share information of how I see snow wheeling and what kind of tips I would give people at this point in my experience of my life. So I hope that you enjoyed the video. And for those of you that are new to this world, I hope that I helped speed your learning along a little bit, or at least gave you some things to think about and look up. So I hope you enjoyed the video. We'll see you on the next one.